we need to address something that could become a big problem for the Minnesota Vikings moving forward. And all of the details are not out yet, but it is something that should concern all Minnesota Vikings fans. And that is the misses and the potential long-term injury status of none other than Minnesota Vikings phenom, Minnesota Vikings young superstar, Minnesota Vikings strong man, Minnesota Vikings comb-overed killer. He's a thriller, Will Reichard. Because following the game, we learned that he was injured or was dinged up, did something to his quad during the week of preparation for the Indianapolis Colts game. And he went out and missed 2 kicks. One, a 53-yarder. Okay, fine. It happens. And then another, a 31-yarder. Doinked it off the upright from 31 yards. And he was perfect, 34 for 34, extra points and field goals up into that point. Now, it wasn't the fact that he missed them short. He was just off. He missed them both to the right. And this is something that I think is more concerning than meets the eye, because field goal kickers never get the right respect from NFL, from fans, from organizations, because the game is typically won or lost on their leg. Final seconds, who do you call in? Bring in the kicker. And the dude is either a hero or he is a bum. There is more pressure on a kicker on an NFL team than almost any other position on an NFL team. Wide receiver 3, they have no pressure. Wide receiver 2, maybe a little bit of pressure. Wide receiver 1 has some pressure. Jefferson has some pressure. But I would still argue that Will Reichard, there was more pressure on Will Reichard to make kicks than for Justin Jefferson to haul in touchdown catches. Because Jefferson was phenomenal against the Colts. What did he have? I got the numbers right here. He had 7 catches for 137 yards. But he didn't score a touchdown. No pressure. Meaning, yeah, he has pressure to deliver, catch passes, have yards. But some of that is on the quarterback position. Can he get Jefferson the ball? So the only position that I would argue has more pressure on them than the kicker position is the quarterback position, because everything goes through the quarterback. Can they play? Can they complete passes? Can they not throw interceptions? Can they throw touchdown passes? Can they pick apart a defense while also reading pressures, escaping the pocket, all of those things? So there's no position that has more pressure on them, I would argue, in any sport than the quarterback position. They have the most pressure everywhere because they control the game. But kickers have more pressure than a cornerback, defensive tackle, linebacker. They either leave the hero and are praised, called amazing things, get a game ball, or they leave as the scapegoat and they are being harassed online by idiotic fans that do those kinds of things. Just look at college football. Look at a guy missing a kick. Death threats everywhere. Look at the NFL. Look at players that miss kicks. They miss too many, they get released, and then they bring in another guy. Green Bay Packers are an example. The Minnesota Vikings are an example throughout years of horrible kickers on their roster. So the fact that Will Reichard missing time is a possibility is a big deal, because for the first time in a long time, the Minnesota Vikings have a guy that is knocked down from anywhere. The Vikings were going to consider, they weren't considering it. They were going to do it. They were going to kick a 68-yard field goal for the win against the Detroit Lions if the Minnesota Vikings did not have an illegal formation when they spiked the ball with 1 second left. They were going to send Reichard out there. But 73 was a little bit too far in O'Connell's opinion. I still wanted to see it. I still wanted to see Will Reichard kick a 73-yard field goal. You just got to believe that the adrenaline is there, and that's going to give him an extra 5 yards. But the fact that he could miss time for the Minnesota Vikings, which means that they need to bring in a replacement kicker, which who knows who that's going to be. You're just trying to get lucky and find a guy that can knock down kicks for a few weeks until hopefully he returns. Apparently, this isn't the first time that Will Reichard has had this situation happen to him, which is all the more concerning because Will Reichard, when he played for the University of Alabama, had a similar quad injury. And I think he missed time because of that quad injury. So this is a big deal for the Minnesota Vikings because you need him back because it's a big, important position. And I am forever on the belief, and I don't think I could be convinced otherwise, that kickers should be selected in the third round of NFL drafts. Maybe not the first 2 rounds. That might be a little high. But you look at some of these guys that are selected mid-round. Think about like a Brian Asamoah, and Caleb Evans. I always struggle with this first name. These guys are, mid-round picks by the Minnesota Vikings, and they're on special teams. They don't even play on defense in their respective positions. You got Will Reichard over here knocking down 60-something yard field goals, and you've got Brian Asamoah, who the Minnesota Vikings might trade today because he doesn't see the field. And I just don't believe that kickers get the respect that they deserve. You know, who has the most points in NFL history? It's always a kicker. I should look that up right now because who has, hang with me here for a second, who has the most points in the NFL? Because, you know, it's always a kicker, but of course, Google doesn't give it to me. It's always a kicker, though. I said, who has the most? Oh, I said, who has the most in the NFL? Points. That's why I screwed up. All right. NFL all-time scoring leaders. Look at this. Look at that. Let me share the screen with you. These guys are undrafted. A lot of them are. These guys get selected in the 6th and 7th rounds. A lot of them are. Adam Vinatieri, Morton Anderson, Gary Anderson, Jason Hansen. I don't know who John Carney is. Matt Stover, George Blanda, Jason Elam, Robbie Gold, Mason Crosby, Sebastian Janikowski, Steven Goskowski. Look at these. These are the leading point getters in the NFL. All kickers. The disrespect on kickers needs to stop. And the Minnesota Vikings, if this Will Reichard thing becomes a little bit long-term, I think it's scarier than anybody is actually talking about because Will Reichard has been absolutely phenomenal for the Minnesota Vikings this season, besides 2 kicks that he had on an injured quad. And they still went out there after the Vikings scored and kicked some field goals in, despite the injury. But you think about like the Packers game. Vikings went down, had a game-sealing drive, and it was sealed by Will Reichard. Against the Jets, the Vikings, up 2017, went down. Big-time field goal by Will Reichard. Gave them a touchdown lead. Same thing against the Niners. Vikings go down. Will Reichard. Vikings are up 20-14. Will Reichard kicks a field goal, go up 23-14. So Will Reichard has a massive impact on the Minnesota Vikings, and kickers have a massive impact on their team everywhere. That's why teams release them if they miss a few in a row, because they know how vital they are to the team's success. So his injury could be a massive problem for the Minnesota Vikings moving forward, and hopefully he heals up fast.